The best of money matters. Right Business.
Welcome to The Right Business, where we dive deep into the stories of trailblazers who dared to disrupt the status quo. Find the gap in the market to find the right business. I'm Nadiah Koh. In today's fast-paced world, juggling the demands of work, parenting, and caregiving has become an overwhelming challenge for many families. The pressure to maintain a career while also caring for children and aging loved ones often leaves caregivers stretched thin, emotionally drained, and with little time for themselves. That's where Anglo Caregivers steps in. With a mission to empower families and transform the caregiving experience, Anglo Caregivers is redefining what it means to provide care. So what innovative solutions and personalized support does Anglo Caregivers offer? And how are they truly making a difference in the lives of caregivers and their loved ones? Joining me today to share more is Vincent Wong, co-founder of Anglo Caregivers. Hi Vincent, welcome to the show.
Hi Nadia, thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right, Vincent, what inspired you to start Anglo, and how did your early experiences in private home nursing shape the decision to focus on live-in caregivers?
The most important person in my life, my wife, as well as my business partner, Kate, is the more introspective one between us, actually. So when she was still in doing consulting with an MNC previously, the direct impact of her work on client companies and organizations was not so obvious to her. So she actually wanted to come out to create something that impacts end consumers directly, to see a positive change in their lives, something that she can do differently, or something that she can improve on to help people directly that we can see, which is why we started Anglo Caregivers. So private nursing actually allowed us to see firsthand the different types of care required that can be done at home, from the activities of daily living such as showering, toileting, diaper change, transferring from bed to wheelchair and back, to more specialized care such as tracheostomy care, suctioning, ventilator, even peritoneal dialysis at home, amongst others. So private nursing is very expensive, and only very well-to-do families can afford long-term private nursing care. We saw that most of the care could be provided by experienced caregivers at a fraction of the cost for employers, which is why we pivoted into live-in caregivers.
I see. I want to expand on that because you said that private home nursing is very expensive. So why are families opting for live-in caregivers as an alternative to nursing homes? What trends are you observing right now?
Actually, I think that families try as much as possible to provide the elderly with what they want or would have wanted. Over the years, there have been several studies, by different organizations showing that most elderly still want to live out their silver years in their own homes, which is what family members are opting, actually. As for the trends, compared to 7 or 8 years ago, more families now are actually looking to employ an experienced live-in caregiver instead of a helper to take care of their elderly loved ones. So previously, most families employed helpers with no caregiving experience. Now, perhaps they will undergo a few days of training in hospital before discharge, before going home and fully taking over the elderly's care at home. So if the helper could not manage, the families would just replace her with another helper with no eldercare experience. Now, more and more families prefer to employ an experienced caregiver with experience caring for elderly with real care needs, such as activities of daily living at least. They are looking for someone specialized in caregiving rather than someone who is proficient in household chores or cooking. So previously, many families did not mind that the caregiver could not speak the elderly's language, could not communicate with them, and relied on simple hand gestures for communication of basic needs such as eat or drink. Now, more and more, families actually place greater emphasis on the caregiver being able to communicate with elderly, speak the elderly's language. They do not mind spending more time to speak with more agencies to interview more candidates.
Right. So what do you believe sets Anglo Caregivers apart from other eldercare services in Singapore? You mentioned something about providing professionals who are able to communicate with the elderly as well.
That is correct. I think our recruitment of caregivers, the whole process of recruitment, is what sets us apart from other eldercare services or agencies in Singapore. So, for example, we have very detailed 30 to 60-minute one-to-one interviews between our recruiters and caregivers to find out exactly, the profiles that we send out after we interview them, will be very descriptive. It will show, from which year to which year, where they worked, what kind of patient they took care of, the medical conditions, the mobility status, if the patient could walk or had to be in a wheelchair or completely bedbound, and what they did every day for the patients. Any specialized procedures such as tube feeding, suctioning, tracheostomy care. So these very detailed profiles that we send out to prospective employers are very descriptive with meaningful information inside, which will help prospective employers make their selection easier. We also sift for candidates with good employment history. They must have finished or very nearly finished the contracts previously. Otherwise, it better be a very good reason why. We reject job hoppers, and we try to bring in healthy candidates, healthy caregivers. We, rather than just believing their declaration of certain of their parameters, right? We, for example, we will make appointments with them to have a video call with them when in the clinics or pharmacies to measure their height, measure their weight, measure their blood pressure. Because build is important to families in Singapore when we choose caregivers. We're not bringing in somebody just to clean the house, right? I'm bringing somebody to transfer my mother from the bed to the wheelchair. I want somebody, I know is strong enough, right? So the height cannot differ very greatly, So we try our best, the numbers on our profile as accurate as possible. And also we can bring our caregivers in very quickly in 1 or 2 weeks, which compared to the usual processing of helpers, which can be 3 to 4 weeks or even 1 to 2 months. Right? So this helps families who are very urgently looking for caregivers, if the elderly needs to be discharged or, somebody wants to quit. Right? And we make sure that we prepare the candidates, test call with them, they know how to use Google Meet. We brief them very clearly on how important attitude is. So if there's no show during the interview, we will terminate the application with us. So all these, in totality, I believe sets us apart from other services.
Right. You mentioned also about the soul. So, families are often worried about trusting someone new in their home. So how does Anglo Caregivers ensure that families are matched properly with caregivers for a successful relationship?
Actually, I think a lot of the times communication is key. Elderly, families will engage us to care for elderly who have care needs. They're already uncomfortable with a lot of pain, some with dementia, and if they still cannot understand the caregiver or the other way around, it builds up frustration, not only for the elderly, but for family members as well. Right? So if the caregiver is able to communicate with elderly, so we actually focus on bringing in caregivers who speak very conversational Mandarin or English for elderly in Singapore. So eliminating this communication barrier, right, it helps a lot in matching the caregiver. And, on top of this, like what I shared earlier, the employment history, we reject job offers, and cultural compatibility is actually very important. A lot of elderly in Singapore will respect for the elderly. Right, they expect to be greeted, to be spoken to in a polite manner with the proper addresses. Right, they expect the caregivers to respect their religion and be able to help out in rituals. Right, so being able to cook local food loosely categorized as Chinese food, Malay food, Indian food is important to the elderly. Right, and I think the family members also naturally be more accepting of caregivers who, regardless of their religion, are able to speak and act in ways that are in line with elderly and family members' way of life. Right, so to improve this match in cultural compatibility, we actually focus on bringing in caregivers with prior experience, working in Singapore, in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, more similar to us. Right, for example, caregivers who worked in Taiwan previously, they tend to be more respectful towards the elderly, whether in their greetings, the tone of voice, how they speak with elderly in general. Right, so our caregivers also generally have no food handling preferences.
Okay, so let's turn this around. What are some of the unique challenges that foreign caregivers face, and how can families here in Singapore create a better working condition to ensure quality care for their loved ones?
Unique challenges that the caregivers face will be that it is actually caregiving, essentially a very tiring job physically, very taxing emotionally. Tiring physically because there's no fixed hours, not like a helper where after dinner you wash up, make sure the floor is not oily, the whole night is yours. But when we bring in a live-in caregiver, if the elderly can walk, if they wake up maybe 2 to 3 times at night to go to the toilet with the elderly to prevent fall, or if the elderly cannot walk, if they wake up 2 to 3 times to turn their position and check and change diapers. Right, in the day, you still have to continue to care for them and help out with household chores for some of them. It's very, very tiring physically. And emotionally, elderly can have their mood swings, right, because they're not well. And then, especially for elderly with dementia, it can be pretty bad, right? So employers will, I hope, need to understand how difficult the job is. And if they can show appreciation, from time to time, it really helps the caregivers and, to not be particular about housework. It is actually very difficult to do your caregiving job very well together with very good household chores. It is not very practical to expect things like that, actually.
Right. I want to segue a bit to Budget 2025 and its enhanced caregiver support. How do you think these incentives allow families to make sustainable, long-term caregiving decisions that can improve both elder care quality and also financial stability?
Actually, there is, within the budget 2025, right, there's an increase to the grant amount under this home caregiving grant. The previous iteration of the home caregiving grant was actually called the Foreign Domestic Worker Grant. Right? So you, at that point in time, you had to employ a domestic worker, and if the elderly, satisfied certain conditions, right, they can get a monthly grant of $120 per month. Right. So actually, from 1st of October, let me just put things in perspective. It was $120 per month, and from 1st of October 2019, this foreign domestic worker grant became our current home caregiving grant, and the amount almost doubled to $200 grant per month. Right. From 1st of March 2023, it doubled again to $400 grant per month to the most needy. And with this budget 2025, it's going to have a 50% increase again to $600 per month for the most needy from 1st April 2026. So when we look at this together, you can see that the increase in the grant amount definitely outpaces inflation by a lot. This definitely helped family members in terms of affordability, right? So, for example, for our experienced caregivers, Mandarin or English speaking, if we include the salary, the levy to MOM each month, 3 meals a day, in total, maybe it's about $1,200 to $1,500 outlay per month. And $600, which is what most of the families who engage us will be able to get for this grant, is actually a 40 to 50% of this total monthly outlay to employ a caregiver. Right? So it really helps out families. And, what about the quality you're asking? When families have more grant, they generally are willing to pay a higher salary for better caregiver, right, rather than an unskilled helper with no prior experience. Now they can feel that, okay, I can afford better care for my mother, for my father.
I see. So on that note of budget incentives, I also want to know, does Anglo Caregivers partner with any local health institutions, community organizations, or other elder care programs in Singapore?
Actually, we do try to reach out to medical social workers from hospitals, from other organizations and community. And we do get referral for two reasons from social workers. One is for Mandarin speaking, because a lot of elderly, they insist on having that. And social workers now, they actually know that we have a very steady supply. We can very consistently recruit Mandarin speaking caregivers who speak the language proficiently. And also, second reason is we can bring caregivers in very quickly within 1 to 2 weeks. And that is very attractive for social workers who want, the hospitals to be able to clear out the beds for the hospitals. Community hospitals, they can hold elderly there, normally 2 to 4 weeks. And for us to be able to bring in the caregiver within 2 weeks, it allows the family to let the caregiver start in the hospital for proper handover from the nurses, from the physio before discharge. Right? So these are the two main reasons why we do get referral from social workers.
But Vincent, do you see tech playing a bigger role in home care in the future? And are you expecting anything in that space to explore?
I do, actually. We started out as a private nursing agency, as you know. When we were doing private nursing, we used to have our own templates, for example, to chart intake output, to chart vital signs such as blood pressure, temperature, oxygen saturation levels. It's like a graph paper where you put crosses of the readings and then you connect the crosses so that it's very easy for doctors to see if there's any spike. Well, if there were an app, for example, that can do this, it will help a lot. I would imagine caregivers just need to input the readings. The charts will come up by themselves. The app can also be helpful. It can allow caregivers to, just put in all of the consumables, your diapers, your suction catheters, your milk, cans of milk that's remaining, so that when it runs down, it prompts the caregiver that, okay, we need to restock. Right? It can be a very comprehensive app in such a way, right, that if it is out there, I would imagine a lot of families would be very interested in doing. But of course, it needs to be simple enough because technology literacy can be quite low for caregivers from less developed countries. And even though, for example, our caregivers can speak very well Mandarin or English, but they definitely cannot write in Chinese, right? So there needs to be some sort of translation, which can be very easy for technology these days. All of these things, if done well, can reduce miscommunication, can make supply management easier. Caregiver will be able to focus more on tending to the elderly to improve patients' health outcomes, right? And all these will also increase the chances that the placements will work out as well for families.
I see. So Vincent, before we let you go, looking ahead, what's your vision for Anglo in the next 5 years? Are there any plans to expand your services or enter new markets?
Well, because of the many, many things that we look out for when we sift for candidates, for caregivers, our pool is generally not as large as what we would like it to be. So, of course, the most immediate plan is to try to increase our pool of candidates, of caregivers, so that we can reach out to more families who require caregiving, right? And also, longer term, there's this thing called interim caregiver services, where before discharge, families can arrange with the social workers in the hospital for a 2-week interim care service where a caregiver will go each day for 12 hours, right, to care for the elderly until the permanent caregiver, living caregiver arrives. There's a lot of families who engage caregivers from us. They tell us that the demand is very high. It can sometimes outstrip supply. So, for example, they can be eligible for 2 weeks, but they just get a few days out of 2 weeks for interim caregivers because not enough supply. So I believe that with our experience in recruiting formally trained and skilled caregivers, we're in a good position to contribute to meeting the strong demand and need for this service.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Vincent, for your time today.
Thank you very much as well, Nadiah.
Thank you. That was Vincent Wong, co-founder of Anglo Caregivers. This has been The Right Business with me, Nadiah Koh.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.